Hello everyone, welcome to Prelims Heist. So today we are in the third class of polity session and quickly we will continue with the questions. So hope that our past classes were also very much useful to you. We have been seeing your responses also. Now in 21st question we are, if you have observed our past videos. So the question is, consider the following statements and they are asking you to find out the incorrect statements. Okay, so when you have that thing in the mind, then you observe that mistake part very clearly. So judicial review is needed to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens. So first thing is that you should be knowing what is judicial review, and it's a very important topic, and most of the times we know that the judicial activism, judicial outreach, and judicial review, these are the important areas in India's judiciary in the recent times, in the past 5 or 6 years. Okay, so judicial review is needed to uphold the principle of supremacy of the judiciary. So firstly, we are saying that it is protecting the fundamental rights of the citizens. So obviously, it should be yes. Judicial review is needed to uphold the principle of supremacy of judiciary. So the simple question is, do we have the supremacy of judiciary in India? Is judiciary the supreme? So that's a simple question, right? So anyone who attends my class should be very clear that what is supreme in India? It is constitution. So obviously the answer will be, they are asking the incorrect statements. So what should be your answer? Keep writing the answers in the comments so that it will be easy for you to assess. So the answer is B because the second statement is wrong. So as simple as it is, judicial review is needed for protecting your fundamental rights. And we all know it that we can protect our fundamental rights, even the wrong interpretation or any other kind of improvements in the judiciary can be done with a judiciary review, because the judiciary will have the suo motu powers in the judiciary review. So even if they have done anything in the past record or they want to improvise the interpretation of that area, it will be much better. Then the next thing is to uphold the principle of the supremacy of what? Constitution, not judiciary. So clearly we know that the one thing which is higher in India is constitution, not judiciary or executive or legislative. It is a constitution which is stable for us. So that's why there is a difference between the due process of law to procedure established by the law. So both are completely different, isn't it? To maintain federal equilibrium, balance between center and the states. So this is also one of the important thing which happens with the judicial review. So judicial review or judicial outreach in the recent times. So anything is possible. Already in the UPSC, we have expected questions and we have seen more than 2 questions in the UPSC in this area. So this is a basic question actually, but anything in the dynamic part also the question can come. Okay, keep and look on it. So the next question is 22nd one. Which of the following refer to such values which have been part of the Indian tradition, mythology, religion, and practices? So, as I have said in the past videos also, the direct one-liner questions are little complicated, though they look easy. So, they are asking that among the given ones, fundamental rights, directive principles, preamble, which talk about or which refer about what? Values. So which refer about the values of tradition, mythology, religion, and practices. Now we all know that in the fundamental rights they talk about religion or practices, etc. But clearly we don't have any fundamental rights here. So somewhere they talk about secularism in preamble, but the tradition and mythology may not get included, isn't it? So directive principles of state policy also somewhere talk about the religion and the tradition things, but not specifically the values related to it. So now the simple thing which you get reminded is that upholding the values of tradition, mythology, religion, and practices is a clear answer which is in the fundamental duties. So as I have said earlier, there will be certain parts in polity which you have to remember them on your fingertips. So that is the fundamental rights and their articles and clauses. Along with that, the fundamental duties also, it's better you make a chart and keep on observing every word to word, even with the commas, so that even if you observe the past questions also, they ask about the fundamental rights, but still they will be able to confuse you, because hardly if you take the fundamental rights, there will not be more than 2 or 3 pages. So how they can confuse you with the same set of 2 or 3 pages of information? So that is the beauty of it. So that's why I have a proper image memory or pictorial memory in this area, so that you will be able to answer most of the questions. Okay, so some of them are moral duties while other are civic duties. This part we know that they contain the civic duties and all. So for instance, cherishing the noble ideas of freedom struggle. So we talk about the valuing the freedom movement people, and also respecting the national flag, national anthem. We do it by the acts also. And to refer such values which have been the part of Indian tradition, mythology, and religion and practices. I thought that I will take the words which you might feel that they are included or not. Because if you check the past question, the confusion is not between the directive principles or fundamental duties. The confusion is that you will have none of the above. So in exam hall, you will think that why constitution talks about tradition or mythology. So there you might feel that maybe it's none of the above. So that's why you have to be clear that these words were clearly used in the fundamental rights. So that is a simple thing. So at least in some areas, as a UPSC aspirant, you should be very sure enough that yes, I recognize you, these words were there or these words were not there. So that is a simple job. Now the next question. So the 23rd question. Consider the following statements. The basic structure doctrine, the basic structure area we are talking about, was adopted by the Supreme Court of Bangladesh with an inspiration from Indian case, Keshwanand Bharati case. So we know that in India, the basic structure doctrine was implied from Keshwanand Bharati case. So it was a very long case and with a maximum possible judicial bench. And finally, they have come with a conclusion that we should have the basic structure doctrine to protect the philosophical part or the soul of the constitution finally. And now the question, the statement says that the same thing has inspired the Bangladesh, and they also started adopting it. So you know it, it's easy whether you know it or not. If you don't know it, you cannot take a broad guess. This is not something which is related to the static part completely. So then next point, rule of law is a part of basic structure of Indian constitution. This statement is quite easy. So anybody who understands the Indian constitution, they know it very clearly that rule of law is very much basic in nature, and we have included it also. So who includes all these things actually? Do we have a list? Yes, the judiciary includes the parts in the basic structure doctrine, and the rule of law is already included in that area. So the list is given in your Lakshmikant book also. Please refer the list. And even in the recent judgments anywhere also, they are including any other new parts. Keep an eye on it. So now the answer will be that the 2 is correct. Actually, the statement 1 is also correct. We have been inspiring the basic structure part of the constitution, not just for Bangladesh, even for the Malaysia and many other countries also, that I wanted to ask. They may not ask the case actually, Anwar Hussain Chowdhury versus Bangladesh case it was, so that they have also adopted. It was a very good judgment. They applauded, and they also wanted to protect their constitution, and they have taken this concept. Then we know that it protects the sovereign, democratic, and republic nature or the secular character of the constitution, separation of the powers, and also the rule of law. So that is a simple thing which we must be knowing about the rule of law. Okay. So the next question is the 24th question. Consider the following statements. It is about the interstate council. So interstate council I have asked because the recent relationship between the center and state are getting more and more heated up. So any organization which should function to improvise the relationship between the center or from one state to another becomes important in this limelight. Okay. So The first statement says that the Article 263 contemplates the establishment of interstate council. So if you have referred the Article 263, then it should be easy enough. And at least for the mains, you should have referred, because center and state and interstate relation questions are more common in the governance part. Then the second statement, interstate council is a constitutional body. So when we are associating the interstate council itself with an article, it has the maximum probability of being the constitutional body. So that is one thing. And interstate council is a non-permanent body which investigates, discuss the subjects between states and center have common interest. So states to states and center to states also. Actually, you don't need to get confused. So the paradox is that, is it a non-permanent body while it is a constitutional body? So usually we assume that part, isn't it? That constitutional bodies are permanent, but here it is not like that. So interstate council is a non-permanent body, but still it is having a relevance to creation from the article. So that's why it will be considered as constitutional body. So what will be your answer? So obviously it should be C, because all the statements which are given are correct. So the first statement, Article 263 contemplates, you have to read Article 263. It's an important one in the recent times at least. So the president can establish such council at any time when he feels it is necessary. That's why it's not permanent. So we are not saying that it has to exist always. Whenever there is a necessity, we are saying that it can be established. So that is a purpose. We are calling it as non-permanent but constitutional. So there are very few bodies which are non-permanent and which are also constitutional. Keep a list of them. It will be an interesting question. So Article 263 specifies the duties that can be assigned. So it talks about the duties, what they have to do. In that only we have referred. So anything between the states and between the center and the states. So where they have the common interest and they are ready to solve with it. So making recommendations on any subjects, be it the union, state or the concurrent list. It's just recommendation and there is no force that they have to follow it. So all the three statements are correct actually. And in the limelight of cooperative federalism or the competitive federalism articles which are coming in the news channels or the newspapers, this article becomes important, I have thought. So refer any information in this area. Okay. Next question. Question number 25th one. So it is related to National Integration Council. The issue is because we are having that war kind of environment with China. So who is a true patriot? Who is a true Deshbhakt? These kind of topics are like more and more common whenever you have a war kind of environment, isn't it? We are talking about the China boycott issue, or we are talking about whether you have a proper feeling towards your country or not, and you're judging them. So that's why I thought about talking about National Integration Council here. Okay. So the first statement says that the National Integration Council is an extra constitutional body. So we know that there is a concept called as extra constitutional body. So a non-constitutional body can also be extra constitutional body, as simple as that. The government also constituted a ad hoc committee of National Integration Council. So they are saying that the National Integration Council is an ad hoc body right now. It is an ad hoc body right now, they are saying. So we do have a committee, but it's not ad hoc. It is a standing committee. And the first statement is correct because it is not a constitutional body. So what they have asked for the correct answer. So the correct statement they are asking. So which statement is correct? The statement 1 is correct. And the statement 2 is not correct. So what is the answer? Please write down. Okay. So the answer is A, as simple as it is. The statement 1 is correct and the statement 2 is not correct. So the National Integration Council was constituted in 1961. This I wanted to remind in the video because at that time also we had this situation like where we were having that war kind of scenario with China only. And then we have been emphasizing on the word unity in diversity, and we have done a lot of awareness programs and different things to improvise that situation. And thereafter, in 2010, to improve various other activities of this organization or council, we have established a standing committee, not an ad hoc committee. We have established a standing committee for NIC, So it consists of Home Minister as the chairman, that you remember very clearly, not Prime Minister as the chairman. And then the 9 chief ministers were various states and 5 co-opted members. It might have been increased or it can change, but the chairman concept is intact. And then, like creating the body as an extra constitutional one, that also you remember, because whenever there is something negative happening in the society, you should always think about the positive tools which are there to correct that situation. So that's why we are talking about this organization right now, and we are expecting that it will create some kind of unity kind of environment in the country. Okay, then the next question, 26th one. So the Cooperative Societies of 97th Constitutional Amendment Act, as I have said, most of the times UPSC would love to give the information and then ask the question. So gave a constitutional status and protection to cooperative society. So it means that it is mentioned in the constitution. And now they are asking you to identify very clearly the incorrect statements, not the correct statement. So obviously there should be one incorrect statement. If not, then there should be the none of the above option. So the simple concept is that we all know it is included in the fundamental rights also. It is included in the directive principles of state policy also. It is included in the cooperative societies also. So as a right, it is included in the fundamental right, and as a new directive principle, it has been included in the directive principles, and as a part separately as a part B. So then, like of the 9 part B, it has been entitled in the cooperative societies separately. So if you know this information under the Cooperative Societies Act, so then like Amendment Act, you will be knowing it very clearly. If you don't know it, then at least please refer the articles also. I have not questioned the articles here. Actually, I wanted to give the articles and ask the question, but it becomes more tough enough, I thought, or it becomes more factual. So, but please, the cooperative societies have come already in the exam also, but anytime it can come again. So please refer it, because the importance is increasing because of the former situation, and whatever the development which we want to bring under the Atmanirbhar concept also. So the importance of the cooperative societies increases slowly. So then the answer will be D, because we have asked the none of the above statement, because we have asked the incorrect one, if you remember. See, we have asked the incorrect, so that's why it will be the D. Okay. So it made the right to form cooperative societies a fundamental right under Article 191. This I wanted to ask actually. It included a new directive principles of state policy on promotion of cooperative societies, 43B2. So that is one thing. And then like Articles 243 ZH and 243 Z3. So this is what it is related to. That is one thing. Now the next question, which is related to the central adverse risk. So this is not a concept which is there in the Lakshmikant IAS. So this is a recent news, which is, if you have been following the past news, you will be knowing about it. Consider the following statements regarding central adverse list. So what is central adverse list? It is related to the list of individuals who have been shortlisted for certain kind of activity where they were threat for the country. That is a simple definition which you can give. So here the Ministry of Home Affairs, so Home Affairs duty it contains a list of individuals who supported the Khalistan movement only. So as I have said, wherever you see the word only, you have to be double careful. That is one thing. And this list constantly used by all Indian missions and consulates to stop the India's individuals named in it from entering to India. So first I will explain it. Actually, the people who have done something scary or threatful for the country, or any separatist movement or anything, then they will be listed. And once they move out of the country, then they will not allow them to enter inside the country, because already they have done something wrong under their name. So that is a central adverse list. So it is true that they are the people who have participated in the Khalistan movement actually, but the word only makes it wrong actually. So why? Because the terroristic people also, or the terrorism group people also, who have been named that they have done something wrong, they would also be included in the central adverse list. So the simple question is that why it is in the news now. and why these things are being discussed, because they have removed certain people from this list, and they have identified that only certain people are there and all. So that's why the central adverse list has come into the news once again. So that you please refer the news so that you will get a clear detailed information. So tell me what should be the answer right now. So that only is a wrong thing. Okay. So 2B. And center has removed the names of 312 sick foreign nationals from its backlist or the central adverse list. So it will be anyone, like when they identify that it is like they are favorable for the separate movement or any kind of thing, then they will include them in this group. So that is one thing, and not just the Khalistan movement, it is a separate list. So anyone who has a terrorist outfit or who have violated the visa norms in their previous visit also will be included in the blacklist or the central adverse list. I guess that you might be hearing this word in the movies also, like where they say that are you blacklisted, you are in the blacklist or something like that. So that is one thing. So who have included in this sexual crimes against children in their respective countries, like if they have been arrested or they have that cases in their country where they are living, and they have raped a child or something, if we get to know and we have put them in the central adverse list also, they will not be allowed to enter in India. So this, if you have followed the news, it will be clear. If not, please go through it because it is an important thing, as Ministry of Home Affairs is involved and it is more and more in the discussion. Okay. So the next question, 28th one. So one more easy question, it is little bit. So the Election Commission of India recently declared which of the following party as national party, making it first from northeastern region to earn this status. So the national party status actually for a northeast party. So northeast, anything as I have said, it is a what you say more favorable area for the UPSC, and they are asking that which is that party which got the national party status from the northeast. So this is a direct factual question actually. If you know it, then you know it. If you don't know, you are not supposed to guess it. So People's National Party, National People's Party, Party for Northeastern Development, none of the above. Actually, these kind of questions are very rare. Usually they ask in SC, CGL and all. But why I have asked it is because national party status is something which happened for the first time for Northeast. And the Northeast referring about this thing was a long-term dream of everyone. So they can have a platform right now. Until now, having a platform for their problems itself was a very difficult thing. So that's why it is a very, very inviting thing which has happened. So any area the question might come. I just wanted to highlight this area of topic for discussion. So the question can come from any direction or it can be as simple as this thing also. Sometimes UPSC asks like that. So please refer it, and the whole information related to it also, please refer it. Okay. Or if you can write, you can write in the mains answer that they are growing and there is a development in the political arena also in the Northeast, etc. So the name is National People's Party (NPP). It is recognized as a state party in Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, and Nagaland. Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, and Nagaland. So it's a eighth national party in the country. I hope that you know the other seven. So Indian National Congress, obviously, Bharatiya Janata Party, the ruling party right now, and the Bahujan Samaj Party. So the major people like OBC, SC, ST, and together Bahujan Samaj Party, and the Communist Party, the age-old party, and the Communist Party of India, Marxist, which is a division of it. Then the National Congress Party, the division of Congress Party, and All India Trinamool Congress. This is also the division of National Congress Party, INC. Okay. So I'm not saying that you need to remember all these parties, but it's better that for you to write any of the main chances also, you should be knowing at least these parties and their manifestos and their leanings, whether they are left or they are right or they're center left or they are what you say right, extreme right or extreme left. You should be knowing it so that you will be able to discuss the ideologies better in the mains. Okay. Then the next question, 29th one. So it is related to the language. Consider the following statement. Firstly, with respect to judgments, decrees, or orders passed by the High Court, must continue in English only until Parliament prescribes others along with it. So the simple statement is saying that judgment, decrees, everything which is released by the High Court should be in English unless Parliament is not asking it to have it in one more language. Is it? We know it about the Supreme Court, isn't it? About the Supreme Court, I have said many times that the English is the mandatory language and you don't have any other option. That's why we have an option of filing the fundamental rights case in High Court also. Now think about whether it is in the High Court or not. The state legislature can prescribe the use of any other language other than English with respect to bills, acts, etc. But the translation of same must be there in English. So that is a point. So they are talking about one is state legislature, what language it uses, and is it must that they have to use the English. In the High Court, do I have an option to use one more language if the Parliament prescribes, and do they have to pass it generally in the English? So actually both the statements are true. Please remember it. Both the statements are 100% true. So keeping in the diversity of India and keeping the age-old habit of India under the Britishers, we have this rule in India that even if it has Hindi as a state language or Urdu as a state language also, they have to produce that thing in the English because we have many minorities. And even in the state legislature also, it's a common practice. They have to provide the translation to everyone so that it is convenient for everyone. So C is the answer, both 1 and 2. Okay, C is the answer. So all proceedings in Supreme Court and in every High Court, that High Court you don't forget, that's why I asked about the High Court. Okay. So the authoritative text of all bills, acts and ordinances issued by the bylaws or central and state levels. And even the judgment, decrees and everything which is released by the High Court, and also whatever the state legislatures which are providing. So that is the case with the English language. Okay. So finally, you get to see it here, state legislature thing. So must be published. It is a mandatory thing. So the last question, under which of the following articles in Indian Constitution the recent witness protection scheme is formulated? So I have been discussing this in the other class also. There is a recent scheme which is a witness protection scheme. Actually, we protect the witness. It's not like we don't protect the witness at all. But whenever there is a threat which is proved, or there was an attack on the witness, or it is a heinous crime case or something, then only we talk about the witness protection. In the usual other cases, we don't talk about the witness protection. But the question is not about all that thing. They are asking that under which articles is it related to the Indian Constitution firstly, and which article is it? So Article 131, you should be knowing what it is, and Article 123, this also you should be knowing. The only confusion should be what is Article 146. Is it related to the witness protection scheme or not? It's not. So all these are not. So obviously the answer will be none of the above. So which is that article which is related? It is the Article 141 and 142. So it has provided the legal sanctionity to the scheme that you have to protect the witness. So this is a recent decision which has been taken in the recent Zahira Sheikh versus State of Gujarat case. So we have said that National Investigation Act provides for the witness protection, although it protects in the earlier time. But we have said that it is necessary for free and fair trial. Even if the witness is not attacked already also, you are supposed to protect the witness. Why this has come is that there were many cases in the recent times where the witness were under a serious threat. So under this protection, what exactly we do is that we hide the place where the witness is there, and we make them allow the discussion in the virtual platform, so they can sit somewhere where their position of stay is hidden, and so that there will not be any threat to them, and then they can do the conversation to the court in a virtual platform, so that the witness will come forward a lot and the cases will be solved easily, because the absence of the witness to the court, that is making the cases delayed more and more. Already we are having a lot of delay in the cases. So we want the witness to tell something fastly so that we can decide the things faster, and we want to protect him or her also, because they are at most important. They should not worry about the capacity of the judiciary or protection. So we are providing this security. So CCTV camera and the virtual interaction with the court, that is a witness protection scheme. And we derive it under Article 144, 141 and 142. Okay. Please remember that. If possible, read about that scheme also. It's interesting little bit. Okay. So hopefully, as I have asked, please write down how many you are getting right and where you have gone wrong. And you can convey anything if you want anything in the next videos or anything also. Okay. Thank you.